Oh, hello everyone. Welcome to the plenary number 2 for 2021 NCLC. It's such a pleasure to see so many Chinese teacher colleagues, friends to be here with us. So we have a very important topic to discuss today, moving beyond novice level Chinese. Yeah, I think this is a challenge a lot of us are facing. How do we build the program and make sure the program is growing? And I think you're going to get a lot of great ideas from the panelists today. So first of all, I think I'm going to invite each panelist to introduce himself or herself and also address the question, what does the beyond novice level Chinese classroom look like? Let's start from Matt, 高老师.
Hello, everyone. 各位老师好. My name is Matt Koss, Gao Zhenyuan. I am a second language acquisition specialist at the National Foreign Language Center at the University of Maryland, and I am also a lecturer in Chinese at George Washington University in Washington, D.C. And this is one of my favorite things to talk about. To me, moving beyond the novice level, the most important word that comes to mind is messy. And what I mean by messy is that our students are moving out of sort of that practiced, comfortable, even we might say memorized production of language that sounds really nice to our ears. It sounds beautiful and grammatical, and they're saying all the right things in all the right places. And because they're pushing themselves to creatively express meaning in ways that they haven't practiced in the classroom, and they're using all of their language resources to say things that they actually want to say, sometimes they have no choice but to rely on English as sort of their backup grammar. So what we get sometimes is language is Chinese production that to us, to advanced proficient speakers of Chinese, to teachers, doesn't always sound all that accurate. And as teachers, we're immediately scared. And we're immediately anxious and worried. And we think, oh no, they're making mistakes. They weren't making mistakes last year. And now suddenly they're making all of these mistakes. Something must have gone wrong. They must have forgotten all of their Chinese over the summer. But the truth is, it's actually the opposite. We need to look precisely the opposite way at that phenomenon. And we need to look at that growth as what we might call good growing pains, or what we might even call good trouble, if we want to take it there, right? That's an exciting indication of development for our language learners. And it's normal and natural. And what I tell my students as they're moving out of novice, where they potentially felt quite comfortable, and they're moving into intermediate, I tell them the struggle is normal. That if you feel like you're not quite able to say everything you want to say, and you're using very limited language to try to say new things, congratulations, you made it to intermediate. Now let's keep going. And then the other thing that strikes me as really important for teachers to think about as we're pushing our students beyond the novice level, or if we get a group of students in the class we're teaching is targeted beyond the novice level, is really that we don't trap them at the novice level. And what I mean by that is that we make sure the questions we're asking, the prompts on an assessment that we're giving, truly do give students the space that they need and the time that they need to demonstrate that they actually have language beyond the novice level. So instead of asking students questions like, did you go to the movies over the weekend? To which any normal person would say yes or no. We ask them, what did you do over the weekend? And then they're at least going to give us that first sentence. How was it? Then they're going to give us a lot more production. So it really has to do with how we're prompting, how we're cueing, and how we're scaffolding them. Because I think we often think about prompts and questions and tasks as pushing our students beyond their current level. But sometimes I don't think we think enough about whether or not our prompts and tasks are holding our students back. And then the question becomes, is the assessment, is the task truly, is it a question of the novice level language that our learners have, or is it that they actually had intermediate level language and they never had the opportunity to show it off? So I think we have to be okay with mess, and we have to understand that it's one thing to teach accurate language, but it's another thing to assess the language for what it is, understanding that intermediate level language is not always all that accurate, and to always focus on what they can do. Because like I tell my students, sort of to conclude my time here, what I tell my students is, a while ago, you knew zero Chinese, none, 0 words. You might know some Spanish because you watched Dora the Explorer, but you knew 0 words in Chinese. So anything that you gain from 0 to now is progress. So we're going to keep watching you grow and grow and grow, and growing involves growing pains, and that's normal.
Wow.
So
wow,
that's what I think.
Very good point. I'm sure a lot of audience will take away with this word messy. We need to be psychologically ready to face the messy situation. And next one, let's welcome Lisa 老师, 欧阳老师, please.
Hello, my name is Lisa Olsen Dufour, Chinese name Ouyang Li, Ouyang Xiu de Ouyang, Dou Li de Li. I teach Chinese at Grandview High School in Aurora, Colorado, which is a public high school. I teach Chinese 1, Chinese 2, Chinese 3, Chinese 4, and AP Chinese, and have done so for the last 15 years. In addition, I am the high school co-chair of the AP Chinese Development Committee, and I've been reading AP Chinese exams for probably 11, 12 years now. So I come at this question from the perspective of helping students to develop all the way to that AP level of language ability. And I want to pick up on and kind of echo what Matt was saying about sometimes teachers mistaking memorization for proficiency. I have encountered students sometimes who come into my program from other places, and I ask them some questions to begin to try to assess their language level, and they don't understand my questions and they can't answer anything. And so then I invite them to ask me questions, and they struggle to ask anything. But I say, well, what can you say? What can you do? And they will spout a lovely memorized paragraph on some topic that has language that is very sophisticated, but clearly they don't really know what they're saying. And so I think that as teachers, we need to be very careful not to mistake a student's ability to memorize a very well-constructed paragraph that's prepared ahead of time for actual communicative proficiency, which I think we've come to know, and we are still striving to improve in the classroom in this way, but that kind of learning is only attained through doing. So I feel like in the classroom, students, I feel like as a teacher, my job is mostly before I'm in the classroom. I'm setting up activities, I'm preparing information, or I'm preparing ways for students to interact with each other in the classroom or to interact with text in the classroom. But during class time, I want the students to be interacting with each other, interacting with me, interacting with the text, and using that time insofar as possible from the first minute to the last, actually really trying to do something with the language. I'd like to also echo what Matt said with regard to understanding that intermediate level language is not perfect, right? We remember that the ACTFL, those benchmarks do indicate that intermediate level language is language that can be understood by a sympathetic native speaker, that has errors that do not interfere with communication. And so I want to, again, really second what Matt said about when a student can say something that you understand, even if they put their time word at the end of a sentence, or they used sure with their adjective, or whatever it might be, right? A real basic Chinese 1 level instructional error, but they're communicating, they're using the language, they're trying to put it together extemporaneously in the classroom. We want to be, as teachers, looking for what can they do? What can they communicate? What can they do right? As opposed to, oops, there was another mistake. Oops, there was another mistake, right? So focusing on actual communication, communicative proficiency, trying to make our classrooms as much about students actively using the language as possible. I think these are the things that help us help our students to rise to that next level. And I don't know how everyone else feels. I'm suspecting probably many of you feel as I did. This year was very hard, in large part because my classroom is about doing and interacting and connecting with the students, and doing that in this kind of a format online when we're all looking at little boxes. And I don't know about your students, but my students don't like to turn on their video, so we can't even really see their faces. It's been a real struggle, and I have learned even more than before to value the time that we have to interact and have students using their language in the classroom. So.
Thank you, Ouyang Laoshi. Such a good point. I think, my takeaway from you is that proficiency, or if we want to move students beyond novice level, proficiency is not about how much they know about the language. Which, on the contrary, proficiency is about how much they can use to do with the language. So interaction, communication, those are the two keywords. Thank you, Lisa. Let's move on to Vicky. Please introduce yourself, and share your thoughts, please.
Hello, 大家好. My name's Vicky Wang Andy. It's a pleasure to be here, meeting new friends and seeing old friends here. I am a Chinese language teacher teaching at a K-12 independent school called the St. Paul Schools. It is right outside of Baltimore, Maryland. I teach at the high school division, teaching Chinese 1 to 4 and IB Chinese. I am also serving as the Vice President of Chinese Language Association of Secondary and Elementary School, aka CLASS, and co-founder of Courageous Dialogues with Chinese Educators. It's such a great pleasure to be here and sharing and learning with my peers and mentors. So for me, what does a beyond novice level classroom look like? To help my students advance their language proficiency beyond the novice level, for me, one way is to talk about relevant topics, such as current events. One purpose for doing that is to boost motivation. Students need to be interested and curious about the topics for them to want to learn. I think curiosity really is an integral part of learning. So for me as a teacher, I have to constantly update my materials based upon what is relevant at the time. We can teach the same grammar points and structures and words using different authentic resources that is available at the moment. And of course, that means that we as teachers may have to get out of our own comfort zone and stay on top of what's happening in the society and in the world, and more precisely, actually, in young people's world. We have to connect our materials to real life to make our language relevant, exciting, and come to life for our young students. And another reason, again, for practicality, there are so many words students cannot learn through textbooks. Words that matter tremendously to young people's lives. For example, in response to anti-Asian racism, I have students read and research on prominent Asian American figures in history, reading and writing about their stories, how they overcame adversity. Students learn words such as immigration, racism, bullying, microaggression, stereotypes, cultural appropriation, human rights, etc. Concepts and ideas that they would talk about in their first language with their friends or on social media, but they may never learn about them in Chinese if we only stick to the textbooks. Through learning about the lives of these prominent Asian and Chinese Americans, they realize that they not only can use their language skills and cultural knowledge overseas in Chinese-speaking regions. There are Chinese people, a vast diversity of Chinese Americans from different backgrounds within their own communities. And they understand that learning the language and culture is in fact much more practical and functional than they realized. It is relevant to their own everyday life. They build empathy towards people who are different from them. That's not to say textbooks do not have its place. We can always use our existing existing textbooks as reference points. But we really need to think outside the box, get out of our comfort zone, make our delivery relevant and current. And the students need to feel emotionally invested in the content and materials in order for them to be motivated to learn. And it will help them tremendously in retaining the language skills they've acquired, not just gonna forget about them after a quiz or a test. We can do so much to advance students' language proficiency as well as their critical thinking ability if we provide them with materials that they can relate to and are interested in. So keep them curious. That's my 2 cents.
Well said, Vicky. So I think we move from message to interaction to topics. And now let's hear from Zhang Jiao. Yeah, please introduce yourself and let the audience know what the Beyond Novice Classroom looks like in your mind. Thank you.
大家好，我是张宏明 ，I'm the 洪明章 from University of Wisconsin Madison. I'm the professor of the Chinese program and also served the head for this program more than 10 years. Meanwhile, I'm also serving the president of International Association of Chinese Linguists 国际中国语言学学会 and also serve the vice president for International Society of Teaching Chinese as a Foreign Language 世界汉语教学学会. Today, I would like to share some thoughts about Chinese language teaching at the college level. Okay. So I would like to discuss this issue, share some PPT. Could you see my PPT? Yes or no? Could you see the PPT? Hello?
No, we cannot see it.
Could you see my PPT right now?
Yes, yes.
Okay, and so I would like to introduce the college education definition of each stage of the standards-based measurement of proficiency. The short form is the STEMS. In the United States, Chinese language education in college basically follow the STEMS. According to STEM, which is set by ACT4, language proficiency level is divided into 4 stages and 11 levels shown here. Namely, novice level, novice low, novice mid, novice high, intermediate low, intermediate mid, intermediate high, advanced low, advanced mid, advanced high, and superior or distinguished. Because of this, Plenary mainly discuss how to break through the bottleneck after the novice level stage of Chinese learning. So I will only discuss the benchmark standards of novice level and intermediate level here. So here is the benchmark template, how to define the language proficiency level according to this table. Okay. So this is the information about categorize the language proficiency level at the novice middle level. That one is the novice lower level. So for this, so what we were taught for the students at this level, this is the contents. And what's the function, what's the goal we should achieve for interpretive parts and presentational parts. Then based on this, then what text we will choose. And this is the parameter for so how to measure our students reach this level. Okay. So this is information for categorized novice middle level proficiency. this is for Novice High. And this information for categorize students with the level at intermediate and low. This is intermediate mid. And this is for intermediate high. Okay, since I'm from the UW Medicine, now let me tell you how the UW Medicine's curriculum design of Chinese language courses corresponds to STEMs. This is only a rough correspondence, which shows a goal that we want to achieve when designing the curriculum. However, the real situation is much more complicated. In teaching practice, we notice that there is a bottleneck after the novice level stage of Chinese language learning. So then we tested the students' level after 1 year training, 2 year training. So how many students they can reach this level? And also we asked some questions about the learning motivation and the feedback about their own progress. So this is the result, show us. So among those students, we asked the students these questions. So what is the negative fact that would, if possible, stop you from learning Chinese? Among those students who feel no sense of accomplishment in Chinese language learning, about 15% are the first year students, 30% the second year students, and 60% the third year students. So then it can be seen, since the students of the fourth semester and the fifth semester are the students who are transitioning from the novice level to the intermediate level. This is the place where they have met a bottleneck in Chinese language learning. How to break through this bottleneck of Chinese language learning and help our students succeed in their study of Chinese. This is one of the major issues we are facing now. Okay, so this is what I want to share with you first. Okay.
谢谢张老师. Thank you so much, Professor Zhang. Yes. Oh, wow. So I think after listening to all four panelists, we get a better idea what a beyond novice level classroom looks like. Now let's work on some strategies. Oh, before that, sorry, I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Ying Jing, and I teach Chinese in California, Cupertino, California, and I'm on the board of ACFO and CLAS, aka CLAS, because Chinese Language Association for Secondary Elementary Schools. So let's move on to strategy part. And first, Vicky and Lisa, maybe you can take turns to share with us, how do we move beyond the basics? And more importantly, spark both the interest and confidence needed for students to enter the intermediate and advanced level. And Lisa, would you like to start?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So strategies for moving students beyond that novice level. I feel like it's very important for students to recognize the progress that they have made and helping them to see what they have actually achieved inspires them, gives them motivation to keep going. So for example, at the end of my second year, so I'm teaching high school Chinese at the end of my 10th grade year, where we've studied lots of very hands-on topics like buying clothing, negotiating prices, talking about the weather, ordering food in a restaurant, seeing the doctor, these kinds of things. We like to do what I call Chinatown in my classroom toward the end of the second semester. And I have students set up around the room. There's the doctor's office, and there's the restaurant, and there's the place where they're going to buy some clothing items, and there's the place where they're going to go to a friend's house to celebrate their birthday. And they have a little card that tells them, here's what you're going to do. You need to go to a store and you want to buy a pair of pants, and here's how much money you have. And they have to go to the store, and they have a classmate who is the salesperson, and they are buying the clothing, and they are negotiating prices to buy clothing. And then they have to go, they get a different task. They have to go to order food in the restaurant, and they have, they are vegetarian and they don't want to eat meat, and they have certain situation, a certain context that they have to, or a certain role that they have to play. And they go through the whole Chinatown experience. And they realize, I can actually do these things. I can actually negotiate these meanings in a, not actual, real, authentic context, because it's just my classroom. Although I do really enjoy when I can bringing in volunteers from the community, parents of my students who do speak Chinese, or I have, for example, I have students whose parents may have served a mission in Taiwan, and their parents speak really good Chinese, and they come into the classroom and help out with these role plays. But that kind of experience, kids actually, they are using the language the whole class period, and they're negotiating these meanings, and they're having fun, and they are realizing they can really do it. So that's the kind of activity that I think inspires them at the end of what for us is the second year, and in college would be, more or less equivalent to the end of the second semester of Chinese language study. Then another thing that I would say is, as a teacher, I saw that there were questions about maintaining target use in the classroom. And my goal, one of my strategies as a Chinese 1 teacher, is to set up patterns, habits, rituals that we do the same way in the classroom every day. And very soon after the beginning of the school year, I can tell them all of those classroom directions totally in Chinese, and they know what I'm talking about. So I think that's one thing that really helps me as a teacher to stay in the target language. And then I like to have my students, I like to set them up in Chinese 1, even by the end of the second or third unit of study. They can ask each other about their families and about their names and about their nationalities and about their families' occupations and things like that. So I'll give them kind of a set of things. Here's what you want to find out from each of your conversation partners. And I'll have them have a conversation with one partner, and then we rotate, and they have a conversation with another partner, and then they rotate and they have the conversation with another partner, and they're having the same topic, but they're having the conversation many different times. So they end up spending maybe 30 minutes of time with very little. I mean, they keep resorting back to English, right? But I'm pulling them back into Chinese all the time. It is possible for kids, even at a very novice level, to try to stay in Chinese. So I would confess that as a Chinese 1 teacher, I don't think I attain 90%. I try really hard. And I try to get that percentage as high up there as I can, but I probably don't get all the way to 90%, because the other thing that I, as a classroom teacher, have to worry about, again, I'm in a public high school in Aurora, Colorado. I have to worry about establishing relationships with my students, making connections with them. And if I'm only ever speaking to them in Chinese, I do feel like that's kind of hard. So maybe my other panel mates will have things to say about that. But I do feel like there is a place for me to speak with my students in English from time to time, just because I do want them to feel connected to me. And I want them to know that I feel connected to them, and that I care about them, and that I want to know who they are. even before they can tell me very much in their own target language. So those are my thoughts. Vicki, I'm sure you have many rich ideas to contribute to.
Lisa, thank you so much for that little confession, because I have to confess, I really do struggle with that 90% target language to stay in 90%. I mean, I really do want to build a relationship, a genuine relationship with my students. And so most of my level ones are ninth graders. There's so much that I want to learn about them, that they want to learn about me, that they cannot express, and that I cannot express in the target language. So I do have to confess, it is very hard. But I do think that relationship building, it is so important. They want to know me as a person, not just as a teacher, and they want to continue in my program. And if they like me, they really care, and they know that I care about them. That plays a huge part in the retention rate in my program. And also, my students really, really enjoy talking about themselves, and they really want to know. For example, they want to know what Chinese young people say when they greet each other. Like, I actually didn't have that answer when they asked me that, because I know how in the adult world that how we greet, but how do young people greet each other these days, right? It's not ni hao. We know that. And it changes over time, right? And they really want to know, what does your school day look like? Or what do they do on a date as a young person? These are the things that actually I don't have the answer to. So what I do is that I invite the international students in my school from China to my class and answer their questions. And I think it's really important to connect their own experience, again, the young person's experience in their own world, and compare it to someone else in the other side of the world. I think that's a very important part of motivating them to continue to learn. Another important point is, I think that us teachers need to demonstrate intellectual humility. We have to be able to willing to make mistakes in front of our students, to admit them, and to model that making mistakes is a completely normal and necessary step before reaching success. By demonstrating that intellectual humility, we help to remove the fear and anxiety from our students so they can take the necessary risks in advancing their language skills.
Wow. Thank you, Vicky. I think, we, teachers not only need to teach our students knowledge, but also, we should be their role model in many different ways. Thank you, Vicky, for sharing, your practice, your ideas. And Professor Zhang Lao Shi, could you please share with the audience how do we strike a balance in regard to the differences between writing and speaking?
Okay. Before I talk about how to balance between the speaking and writing, I would like to discuss how to guide learners to break through to the next level of proficiency. Because as I mentioned previously, foreign students' Chinese learning has achieved remarkable results in the first year or two. But after 1 or 2 years, it seems to have reached a bottleneck. And the improvement of learning level is not as obvious as that in the first year or two. It is widely recognized that students learn a lot, but they don't use much. Therefore, one of the important issues is how to break through the bottleneck after the novice level stage of Chinese learning, stimulates students' interest and confidence, how to adjust teaching strategies, and what methods to implement to achieve breakthrough in the bottleneck. There can be many reasons for the bottleneck after the novice level stage of Chinese learning. For example, learning motivation, textbooks, teaching methods, interests, language environment, may all the reasons. However, what I want to discuss here is the arrangement of teaching contents in the skill training of listening, speaking, reading, and writing. It is generally emphasized that listening and speaking are leading. This may be right at the beginning stage, and it is effective in improving students' confidence in learning. After a short period of Chinese learning, they can understand and speak some, and they will have a great sense of achievement. Therefore, in the field of the Chinese language teaching, listening and speaking are often more important than reading and writing. In this regard, I have some different views, especially after the initial stage of Chinese language learning. Generally speaking, an American student who learns Chinese often envy those learners who have been able to talk smoothly with Chinese native speakers. But in the eyes of an experienced language teacher, being able to communicate with the native speaker smoothly is undoubtedly a skill to be proud of, but it can never prove that someone's Chinese proficiency level must be high and solid. I believe that reading and writing are always the basis of listening and speaking. My personal teaching experience of near 30 years proves that this is true. As far as foreign language learning is concerned, it is common sense to use it to improve and to regress when it is not used. However, my experience in teaching Chinese for many years tells me that whether the ability to read and write is progressing or degrading, it is relatively slow. But the ability of listening and speaking is just the opposite. A Chinese language learner with solid reading and writing skills and profound internal skills may not have strong listening and speaking skills. However, as long as the student has a little practice, his listening and speaking abilities can be quickly improved in a short period of time. In contrast, a Chinese language learner who has not laid a solid foundation in reading and writing at the beginning, but only focused on listening and speaking, his Chinese communication skills may be very strong in a short period of time, and he can talk to native Chinese speakers. However, as long as he is out of language environment for a few years, his language ability will quickly deteriorate, and it is not easy to get it back. Therefore, how to maintain and strengthen the ability of reading and writing is one of the important ways to break through the bottleneck after the novice level stage of Chinese learning. And it is also one of the adjustments we need to make in both teaching and learning. So then I want to talk to how do we strike a balance in regard to the differences between writing and speaking, including the styles, vocabulary, and so on. First of all, we should tell Chinese students that they should never expect their Chinese writing to be as good as that of Chinese people. The most important thing for students to write in Chinese is to convey information, not to show off their literary talent. Therefore, it is recommended that the junior and intermediate level Chinese learners use simple and plain language to write as much as possible. Think more about what expressions they have mastered, what degree they can write, how to grasp the general idea they want to express, and write it down with the most confident expressions. For most people, what is clear and organized is good writing. For intermediate and advanced learners who want to write sentences more beautifully and idiomatically, besides reading more books and accumulating usage, it is also important to learn to use tools correctly. After learning intermediate level, look up new words when writing compositions and avoid using English-Chinese or Chinese-English dictionaries. Therefore, students above the intermediate level should be required to look up the Chinese dictionary only, not only because they are more comprehensive and idiomatic examples in the Chinese dictionary, but more importantly, only through Chinese interpretation we can truly understand the meaning of Chinese words. In addition, what can be recommended to students is to make good use of network tools such as some search engines or Coursera. These tools can help students when they are not sure about a usage or collocation. For example, when you are suddenly unsure what verbs or functional phrase should match, or whether an adjective can be used to describe a noun, you can use a search engine to search for the expression that you are not sure about and see if the Chinese will say so. So let me make a simple conclusion. Students who want to learn Chinese well should remember that reading and writing are always the basis of listening and speaking. The training of listening and speaking needs the support of reading and writing ability. Compared with listening and speaking, reading and writing need to accumulate and test basic skills. If you don't speak Chinese for a long time, you will always stumble or make some mistakes in the first few minutes. However, with a solid foundation and accumulated sense of language for many years, you can slowly recover your speaking ability. After chatting for 10 minutes, and you can talk and laugh freely with Chinese people. Therefore, to train students, we should make more efforts in Chinese classes, read more books, and do homework seriously. The ability of listening and speaking, as well as the high level of translation ability, can be acquired through certain training on the premise of having a solid foundation. It also helps to break through the bottleneck of novice and intermediate Chinese learning. Okay, this is what I'm thinking about to solve the problem. Yeah.
Thank you, Zhang. Yes, yeah, a lot of information for us to digest. And I think, yeah, we do have one more question, to ask Gao Laoshi to address before we move to Q&A. So, Matt, Gao Laoshi, how do we develop our students' skill in reading and writing? Because Zhang Laoshi was talking about speaking and writing. How about reading and writing? What should be emphasized at each grade or proficiency level?
Thank you, Jin Laoshi. This is a really important question, and it's one that I like to talk about, and it's one I fight with teachers a lot about, because I think we have a lot of opinions and we also have a lot of different contexts. And I really appreciate that everyone here on the panel, every time we talk, we're talking from our own context And we make sure we make that clear, because it's very different to talk about writing development or literacy reading development in the case of an elementary school immersion student versus a heritage learner who is a speaker of Mandarin at home versus a speaker of a non-Mandarin language at home, versus a student like Lisa or Vicky or Zhang Laoshi or I teach, who tend to be non-heritage second language learners at some level of non-immersion, right? So it's really important that when we ask these questions and we get these answers, we think about them through the filter of our own context, because it doesn't make sense for me to talk about what a kindergarten immersion teacher should do when I'm not the expert in that context, right? And I'm not the expert of anything, but I'm definitely not the expert of elementary immersion. So when I think about writing, for me, I'll talk about writing first and then I'll talk about reading a little bit. When I think about writing, I like to remind everyone that when we talk about writing proficiency, in Chinese, we have a tendency to get the word confused. And we talk about 写字 instead of 写作. And I hope that from this conference with 1,000 people here, you can hear me say that writing proficiency is 写作, is the writing of text. It is the composition of text, whether it's like Zhang Laoshi talked about, some kind of informational text, whether it's a communication, like an email, it is the composition of text. Writing proficiency does not differentiate between the medium of writing, whether it is typed or whether it is handwritten. Now, for me, I think about efficiency, and I think about a word that stood out to me from what Vicky said, which is realistic, which is, let's be honest, if we weren't Chinese language teachers, how often would you pick up a pen and write anything in Chinese? When was the last time you, native speakers especially, wrote down 你叫什么名字? What is your name? On a piece of paper in Chinese? Probably never. I bet you've never done it in your whole life except in your classroom. So that's real or that's artificial, right? Even when we write emails, I would never send Zhang Jiaoshou an email and say, 张教授, 您叫什么名字? What's your name? Right? Because I already know his name, because I can see it on the screen. Right? So it's really important that we think about what's realistic, and that we also, again, don't let our insistence on the writing tool inhibit or limit the proficiency or performance of the learner in the writing of compositions, right? So for me, when I think about my students, in the same 30 minutes that my student might be able to write a composition the length of 200 characters by hand, I have those exact same students who can write an 800 character composition plus if they're typing. And for me, it's more important that I give them the opportunity to demonstrate their true proficiency in the 21st century context of normal people write composition, especially for formal purposes online. If we were English teachers, we would never accept an essay written by hand. It would have to be written typed. But we, for some reason, and there are cultural reasons and there are all kinds of reasons, we seem to have not been able to get over this 写字 problem, this handwriting from memory problem. And it's one that we need to keep talking about. And to say one thing about literacy, especially since we're going to move into the Q&A, I think it's really important that we remember that literacy development, the development of the ability to read, takes a lot of time. You think about, for all of you native speakers who went through 语文课, you went there, your language arts class lasted from kindergarten all the way through high school graduation. And you were developing literacy as an already competent language speaker for 12 years. So for us as the non-native learners, it's really important to remember that what you're asking us to do is, in a fraction of the time, develop speaking, listening, composition writing, and also literacy skills. And we have to do it all at the same time. Unlike you, who had 6 years to learn to speak and then went to school to become literate. So it's really important that we remember that it requires time. My second thing I want to say about reading is that it's important we remember what is the definition of reading. And the definition of reading is decoding printed text into comprehended messages, right? But that can only happen if the message is already in my brain. In other words, if I don't have the language structure, the syntax, the vocabulary, all of that in my brain to receive the message, it doesn't matter. I can't read it. So when we think about that development, it's important that we remember there is a first and there is a second. And then third, though it is challenging, I think we really, really, really need, in addition to the emphasis on authentic resources, which cannot be emphasized enough, I think we as Chinese teachers need to admit that there is a place for resources like, I'll shout out a couple that I know because I use them in my classroom, whether they're Mandarin Matrix, Mandarin Companion, some of these graded reader books that are written to be, like Zhang Laoshi said, readable based on the level of language of our learners, the productive level of language. In other words, they're decodable, they're not overwhelming. Because think about how much we learned from reading in our native languages and how much we read. Reading gives us an opportunity for independent input because we don't get that much input in the classroom. We tend to think, we hear students all the time, I've been studying Chinese for 5 years. And I say, oh, really? How many hours a week do you take Chinese? And they say, oh, 1. And I say, I'm sorry, you've been studying Chinese for 3 days. And then they kind of go, what? But it's important that we talk in terms of hours, not in terms of years. And literacy development takes years for native speakers. So how could we non-native speakers be expected to do it in a short time? It's not that it's not possible, but we have to have realistic expectations about what's possible in terms of proficiency development in hours, in the hours we have in the classroom, and what's necessary from the perspective of our learners, right? And in terms of reading and writing, we might think they need to read and write certain things, but let's be real. Our learners are not going to grow up to be Li Bai. They don't need to write poetry in Chinese. You can't even write poetry like Li Bai. So is that the goal? I'm not sure. I think it's really important that we focus on proficiency as that guiding light when we think about realistic development in our program.
Thank you. 谢谢高老师. 谢谢高老师. And I really want to thank all our panelists. I think you really give us a lot to think about. And not only from theory perspective, but also a lot of strategies you have shared that we can apply into our classroom teaching. I think one thing we haven't really talked about is assessment. So I'm going to have a question here for all the panelists. How would you adjust the way you assess your students after they move beyond novice level? And would you tailor the assessments to various levels of learners after they surpass novice level? Anyone would like to answer this question from the audience? Assessment. How about...
Well, I can share what I do.
Please, Lisa, please.
The Chen Ming, right?
No, Lisa. I'm going to ask Lisa to answer the question about assessment first. Lisa, please.
Oh, okay.
So as I mentioned before, I do come to my classroom very much from the perspective of developing AP Chinese skills, because that's where my program is leading. For those who are working on an IB model or other models, that it might be different. But I actually my students complete tasks that are like the AP Chinese free response tasks on their assessments. For example, I have them write storyboards. I have them write email responses. I have them engage in a conversation where I ask them individually questions. By the time they're in Chinese 2, I'm having them have more of a presentational experience when they're speaking orally. Hard to get them in Chinese 2 quite to doing that extemporaneously, but working toward that in the long term. So I use kind of the same structure of assessment, but I use rubrics to evaluate their production that are based on the AP grading, the scoring guidelines that we use in AP reading. So for example, starting in Chinese 1, when I am evaluating the writing that my students have done, I am looking for, are they using conjunctions? Did they use the inwei and the suoyi and the keshi that they know how to use? And I'm always pushing them to do that. And as we get into Chinese 2, I'm still looking for use of conjunctions and transitions, but now I'm looking for, beyond the 因为所以 and into the 不但而且虽然可是除了以外 these kinds of things. And as we go on, and once we get to the AP level, maybe instead of 不但而且 they're saying 不仅 or they're saying, they're using 由于 and 因此 instead of just 因为 and 所以, right? So it's not so much that the structure of the assessment is different as what I expect them to be able to do in order to attain the top score in that category of my rubric has the language level has changed, has risen up. So my rubrics contain a category for using conjunctions and transitions, for using diverse grammar, diverse vocabulary, and I'm always trying to push kids to think beyond what did we learn in lesson 9 and what am I trying to use on this particular assessment to what are all of the different conjunctions and transitions and grammatical structures that I've used that I can bring to bear in this context. So that's just what I would say is I'm doing kind of the same structure of assessment, but my level of expectation is rising with each level.
Great. Thank you, Lisa. I think, pre-AP, we really want to push all the tasks, all the proficiency skills students need to pick up since maybe level 1, right? And also, Professor Zhang, we have a specific question for you. What are good dictionaries for students to use? Do you have any recommendations?
What kind of dictionaries? At least 3 types: English, Chinese, and Chinese English, and Chinese to Chinese. If for Chinese to Chinese, 新华字典 is the good dictionary for anyone. If you want to more advanced level, then you can use 现代汉语词典. At the beginning level is 新华字典. So, do I need to write Chinese character here? Okay.
Okay, great. 谢谢张老师. So I think, I'm sure the audience have picked up your suggestion. And we have one more question, and I think this is for Vicky. So I think, can you maybe share with us, say, your strategies, like to align your curriculum with, the actual proficiency, scale?
So for me, I really reference the actual can-do statements and 3 modes of communication to help me design my tasks, lessons, and my assessments, combined with backward design and really crafting the appropriate essential questions. It helps me focus myself and to focus my students' learning. And for each stage, so my students have also I have to design tasks to offer opportunity for students to level up so that we can truly differentiate students' learning based on their ability. And I think that it's important that I over the years, I realized that, growth is not linear. And I think that when I design these, even though I'm designing these tasks and assessments based on a standard, I need to know that my students are growing at their own rate. And to go back, I know that this is a little off topic, but to go back, I do want to stress that, we want to encourage our students to progress and really retain them in the program so that they have the opportunity at a higher level. A lot of students, they 开窍, that it clicked a little bit later, and we want them to give them the opportunity to do that and not to weed them out in the foundational level when they struggle maybe only on a couple proficiency areas. Struggling in a couple proficiency areas doesn't mean that they cannot learn the language.
Wow, thank you. I think, that's really a strategy. I think we all can consider how to, incorporate into our own teaching practice. Definitely align with the proficiency, with the standards and proficiency scale, well, help a lot to move students beyond novice level. I think our time is up, and I understand some audience participants want to get the contact information of our panelists, and I am pretty sure the wonderful NCLC team will figure out a way to share the contact information. And again, I want to thank 高老师、欧阳老师、王老师 and 陈老师. And thank you everybody for this wonderful 1 hour time. And we all learn from you all. We all get inspired by your great ideas. Thank you. Everybody take care.